Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here, the man who talks to machines, and I want to cover as usual, a very important area that is discussed by a lot of pseudo-intellectuals, and of course, an area that has infected the area of manifesting technologies and the fraud perpetrated by Wilhelm Reich and, of course, Orgone, Orgonite, and all the other ridiculous energies out there that people have tried to state actually do something. Of course, they don't. And of course, I want to cover Wilhelm Reich because the bottom line is that as with everything out there, oh, what a surprise, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this guy who seems to have a huge following. And of course, he wrote many books. He was active for many years. And I believe one of the reasons he has survived, even though basically his theories, particularly when it comes to things of the psychology world, I consider totally bogus and worthless. Coming from, of course, his master, Freud, who was another goofball maniac. So we have a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of misinformation in general, which is always fascinating to see what happens to these things. But before we get into that, do you have a question to ask Yoda? Something to decide on? Want to know your future? Well, let's hear what he has to say. Well, basically, he just laughed at your question. Well, he is a little devil. Little green-eyed monster. Okay, so let's move on to discussing Wilhelm Reich. Well, I don't know if this guy is a man of controversy or not. For a guy who was so persecuted, he did pretty well. He was able to come from very bad backgrounds. He had a terrible childhood. And of course got involved in a pretty much which is a compulsion of his, and that sexuality, which a lot of these Arabs have that come from Middle Europe, basically your Persians, your Aryans, your German Arabs. And of course he was born in what is the Ukraine. So to actually, and you can look at him and he looks Eastern European. To say that he is Austrian is a little bit comical, but you got to remember that the German Arabs, of course, claim everybody they can, whether they're Jewish or anything else, so they can state how great they are and their people are when it has nothing to do with it. The people, the actual countries that people come from, particularly when it comes to Europe, have changed in the last 150 years pretty radically. What was Romania, what now is Ukraine, all these things have changed radically considering what is considered now Deutschland, Switzerland, and of course Austria, the home of Central European Arabs who came over through Aryans from Iran. Does that sound familiar? Of course, people don't know it. And of course, Benjamin Franklin, of course, stated it even in his time that his area, Philadelphia, was being invaded by the European blacks. He actually called them blacks because he knew what was going on, because he knew that they were Arabs. And this is important as well because it's more misinformation that you don't quite get. Now, Reich is very, very misunderstood because all we've got is sound bites. Very few people are going to sit down and go through his many books and read his philosophies and everything else. And frankly, I don't recommend it. I'm going to sum it up for you here so you have a general idea of what his opinions are and, of course, where they come from. But why is it important that we also know where this person comes from and his background? But he had a bad taste for sexuality ever since a child. His mother had an affair with his tutor. He came from a wealthy, I guess it was a farming family. I'm not sure about that. And he had personal tutors come in, and his mother had an affair with one. And once she was found out, and this became a public disgrace, she committed suicide. His father then died a few years later, I believe, of some sort of disease, maybe not a few, but so you can see the tragic background and how he connected sexuality to death and other things, creating a mental block of unbelievable proportions. So moving through all that, we can go through the traumas of World War II and the hunting down of his particular Arabic tribe, otherwise known as Jews, which is just an Arabic tribe. So when this happened, and eventually he did fairly good. He hooked up with Sigmund Freud, who became his mentor. He went to college, I think Vienna. I don't know if he I think he became an official medical doctor. I'm not sure. But this certainly seems to be the case. But from there, he eventually, because of World War II and what was going on, he escaped to places like Norway and eventually was able to emigrate into the United States. But what was this all about? Why is he vilified to a large extent today? And what is this all about? Why does anybody even care? Basically, they really don't. His memory has been kept alive because he left apparently a pretty large estate, had a big piece of property. People are running it. There are people who've dedicated their lives to researching his theories. And of course, his information, and of course, it shows you how sexually obsessed he was when he names a natural energy that you condense from the planetary atmosphere, orgone or orgasms, and he's connecting everything to sexual orgasming. And the lack of sexual fulfillment is what's caused all the problems. Now, he got this theory, of course, from Sigmund Freud, who was, of course, hung up on sex, was a pusher for the drug companies, another charming Middle European Arab. So when we get into all these things that we have to understand the background of it. Now, so he got pretty much everything he knew from it, but he came to a conclusion that Freud didn't agree with. And that was the fact that everything in life had to do with sexual frustration. And no matter what hang-ups you had and what problems, it caused cancer, it made your hair fall out, it made you look at the color pink all the time, all the little things, of course, that he connected everything. Freud was fairly close to this, but it did not agree with this. He agreed that there are social conditions as well, which of course makes better sense. Now, this whole theory that everything comes from sexuality could only really come from a Central European Arab, because that's their problem. And I find it very interesting that we should get sexual and mental therapy, but sexual information from the most sexually oppressed, strange group of people that there are, these Arabs that they came from, I can't seem to get the word out. They came from Iran. They're Aryans. Aryans, of course, is their self-claimed title. And, of course, we can trace their history back. And we have the Central European ones. Then we have the ones that went into Northern Europe called Scandinavians, who inbred and created a kind of a whole race, which is why blonde hair and blue eyes, which basically is a birth defect. The only thing past that is albinoism. But of course, people don't talk about this, and of course, they're not really all that connected. The languages aren't really similar, while there are similar words. If you speak what is traditional Deutschland, otherwise known as German, from the person who named that entire area, the Roman general Germania, who named this whole area. And of course, Europeans don't call Germany Germany, they call it Deutschland, which is a Aryan or basically an Iranian word. This is the culture of these people, including pretty much Northern Europe as well. We ought to be looking, we couldn't pick a worse source of people to talk about sexuality from. The Germans have the lowest birth rate on the planet, followed very closely by, and I think they even beat out the Japanese, who are their buddies. It's interesting, two buddies would have similar problems. And of course, modern birth statistics in particularly Germany, are skewed by the fact that the Arabs that come over here, those ones directly, Turks and other things, their cousins, have a high birth rate. As a matter of fact, the largest birth rate in the world, the people who have the most children, are the Muslims. So there's an artificially high, but if you go to the actual Germans as we understand what they are, their birth rate is actually not even keeping up with the population. They've lost millions of people in the last few years, but they brought in 5 million Arabs, which of course bring in 20 million other ones as relatives, etc. So they've stabilized their country that way with bringing in, which are basically people that think very much like them. What is little known is that the German culture and the Nazis and everything else practice Islam practices and were very much into Muslim practices. Something that isn't known. They also had Muslim divisions in the army, and of course they bred their philosophy, which they knew these were their buddies. The same reason they tried to connect to Tibet, who has Aryan roots, or at least their Buddhism, their original Buddhism, Bon, did come from Arya, otherwise named as Iran. So your head now is filled with a whole bunch of facts that you'll probably forget, but you should know and listen to this many times to get it right. And remember, down below underneath this, you'll find a link that you can get all of Wilhelm Reich's books for free. They come from the archive.org, the internet library, and they have every single one of his books you can download as a PDF for free. There's no reason to go out and find copies of these things, pay money for it. Most of these things, oddly enough, I don't know why anything is out of print in this day and age, and he does have some group of people running his old institution there, but they can't seem to get their proverbial poo together. So as we get into this, what's interesting about Reich's work is his discovery of this natural energy. And to call it after, it's like calling something penis energy. This is the kind of mentality you're going to get from these kind of people coming from this particular area, particularly with the sexually uptight and non-performing. And you can find out where the birth rates are in Europe, which of course all of Europe has low birth rates because people are trying to maintain a standard of living. Even the Italians are having problems now. But the bottom line is you go into places like Scandinavia and they are even worse trouble. And of course, these are horrible cultures, and these people have no sexual knowledge whatsoever. The worst people when it comes to sexuality in terms of performing it and knowing what they're doing are the Germans, the Scandinavians, etc. So basically, they are so uptight, so backwards, and so filled with poo in their head, similar to even the French, who are so Catholic that they have all these psychological problems. And of course, Reich says this is the problems of the world, this is why people kill each other, this is why people get cancer. And of course, this is an overstatement of something. We get a lot of our modern philosophy in terms of what's happening in the world, armoring, you're masking it, you have these hidden things. This all comes from Reich, and of course, this manifests in your life in negative ways. So, if you're not sexually fulfilled, then you want to go out and kill people. You have other problems. And of course, I'm sure this is part of the problem, but our real problem, the core of the reason why humans are crazy, murdering scum, is mostly from the fact of this planet in general. All you've got to do is look at videos or documentaries on the animals that live in the ocean and how fierce, ugly, and actually frightening they are, with giant teeth that they eat each other. This entire planet is based on killing something else to survive. How can you possibly breed a society when that's what you have? We followed this up, and I forget who said it, that as long as we have slaughterhouses, we're going to have battlefields, which I 100% agree with. So the whole idea is that to think that this is linked entirely to sexuality. Sexuality is just the icing on the cake. When you decide that you can murder, destroy, and kill, raise to execute for your personal benefit animals, then you are creating a class, a box where it's okay to murder. Human beings in general find fulfillment through murder and war. This is how we prove ourselves as a species. And of course, this goes into so many other areas. So that's really our problem. There is something also intrinsically wrong with the energies on this planet as well, which I believe is connected to this energy that he called Orgone. So there's a lot of bigger pictures here, which I'm not going to go into right now because that's another long discussion, but I will follow that up in other videos. So this was his philosophy. And of course, he was heavily into the fact that, and people misunderstand that this meant that he was for promiscuity. And of course, all of this stuff is kind of mixed. It's hard to tell people to go out and say, yeah, you should be having more sex and not promoting promiscuity. So it's a complicated issue, and he's didn't really have a chance to verify what he stated in his beliefs in detail that people would pick up. All we know is the urban legend about him, which is, again, a lot of it's correct and a lot of it's incorrect. And so the whole idea is he thinks that. So his whole idea was to have not a bunch of sex, having multiple partners or anything else, or being promiscuous. He was about stating of having fulfilling sexuality that releases the tight energies that are in you. The blockages are energies. You could call this that your meridian flows, the energies that flow through your body as understood by Asians, is the fact that when you are unhappy, when you have problems, and of course we can look at this, that if you think bad thoughts, that you weaken. We do this with muscle testing all the time. So if you're, which is a horrible drive, particularly for the males, of constantly wanting sexuality, and that's just another sign of not being fulfilled. If you have a proper fulfilled sex life, you are not constantly craving it or seeking to have it. So, but very few people do that because it's a whole complicated reality that we have contrived with the use particularly of religions who've come along and messed everybody up with their really perverse thinking, particularly when you get into many Christians. And of course, we all know how horny and terrible Christians are with sexuality. The list of ministers that have been involved in affairs and other misconduct. And of course, when we go into all of the Catholic priests who are molesting children, and their whole culture of homosexuality is a real problem. And of course, that's another thing. The largest number of homosexuals on the planet are in the Middle European. Germany, Switzerland, and Austria have the largest homosexual population. So again, we're being lectured by people that come from the most deviant societies. This is also a society that is known for foreplay that involves urine and feces. This is common to the Germanics, these people from the countries I just mentioned. So for them to tell us anything about sexuality is the epitome of amusement. Not to mention they don't know how to do it. They are horrible. Anybody who knows any of that, has had any experience with Scandinavian, Central European women and men, understand the level of incompetency and perversion they're linked to. So we all have to do that. I mean, you can't actually see a German pornographic film that doesn't at least involve urine. This is what they do because this is part of the homosexual, low-level based Arabic training that they have. They come from Iran. Does everybody get that? Should we be learning from people like this who want to tell us about sexuality? Or should we go to our Catholic priest and he can tell us about relationships since he's never been in one? So they can give marriage counseling when they don't even know what marriage is other than performing a ceremony that must mystify them. Oh yeah, we put you together and then you go out and have ice cream. So the whole idea is that these are the kind of things. And of course, Wilhelm Reich had his own problems, and of course he was linked to having many different affairs with his people that he put under therapy, etc. But the whole idea is to release these tensions in you so you feel better. To link a lack of sex with actual cancer is absurd. The bottom line is that many things can be linked to many things, and if you have clogs of your energies, we still can't really link this to anything. There are entire groups, particularly in India and Asia, that refrain from having any sex whatsoever. And these people tend to have long lives, and they don't have problems with cancer. So, I mean, linking all that together is a problem, but it's also a misunderstanding that somehow he was pushing cures for any illnesses. And the bottom line is that orgone accumulators are toxic junk, and they really have done nothing. They haven't been able to prove anything. Now, he was harassed by the FDA not because of any claims he was making. He really didn't make claims. He was harassed, and they went after him with this healing area because the head of the FDA at that time was a typical constipated, backward person who believed that Wilhelm Reich was a sex freak that was preaching some sort of swinging lifestyle, which threatened this person. I'm sure he was probably a good Christian as well, running the FDA. So they went after him because of that, and they really didn't go into his work or read anything. He was a sex deviant. He had these things, and he wasn't making any claims that I'm familiar with. He did a lot of research working on people with numerous illnesses, and he failed with every one of them. He did a lot of work on cancer, and cancer that he treated, many patients, they all died. You hear that? They all died. And of course now Orgonite, or the horrible toxic energy that is, and orgone accumulators that people are using like their candy out there, are causing a lot of illnesses and disease and death now. There actually have been traced many, particularly orgonite created by the Satanist Karl Hans Welz, has been linked to numerous deaths. And of course, it's difficult to go through all these things in detail here, and of course, nobody really cares. But the bottom line is that he did do some interesting work, but his theories of sexuality and everything else are almost comical as far as I'm concerned. And secondly, just as I mentioned with the priest that I would not go to for marriage counseling, I wouldn't go to an Austrian, German, Swiss, Scandinavian people to tell me about sexuality when they're the worst at it. They have no skill at it whatsoever, and everyone knows the cold, rotten functioning, particularly of women from these areas, who can't perform, who are so uptight and have problems, but of course that's part of their culture. But you don't know that because you live in the urban legend, as what's happened recently that's come out of the top 5 worst cars in the world. 4 of them are German, or did you think they're wonderful, including Mercedes-Benz? Horrible repair records. The number 1, just for info, is Volvo. Well, I guess we can connect that to the Swedes and the garbage that's going on there, even though Volvo is no longer owned by the Swedes. But these are the kind of urban legends you live in that you don't get. So the whole idea is to say that Reich was a swinger that wanted people to hump everything that moved. He wanted people to have satisfying sex, so the researchers say. But he was in the free sex movement as well. There's a lot of misinformation there as well. A lot of scholars want to clean him up, and he wasn't very clean. But the bottom line is that he wasn't really preaching swinger lifestyles. We've also found that people who tend to be having very sexual, including we have a record now, pornographic movie stars, tend to have pretty bad health. And a lot of them die from all sorts of diseases. And of course, because of the industry in general, a lot of them commit suicide. But a lot of them get cancer and everything else. So having this flowing out of energy all the time to release these clogs certainly didn't work there. But Reich would say, well, the problem is that is just sex. It's not releasing the tensions that are stored up because of your constipated attitude towards life, or being from that Arabic culture, and of course from those societies. So again, anybody who knows anything about these cultures will of course understand this, and understand the fact that they have the highest homosexual population on the planet, and invite lots of them still in. They bring in many from their cousins in, the fellow Arabic people. So the whole idea is we have to understand that. But that whole theory doesn't hold water with me. And as I said, if we get away from murdering everything on this planet, the water, the soil, the animals, I think we'd have a much better attitude. And of course, if we had a more productive understanding of and releasing energies, which nobody does through sexuality, thinking that if you orgasm, you've released all this. Well, it's just not true. Most of these processes is that the male can't wait to orgasm and the female can't wait to get it over with. That's your normal sexual communication. So it's a strange world we live in, but to give credit and to go to follow Freud, who's going to give us sexual advice while he's getting hooked on dope from the manufacturers you work with, is comical. To the high. But you don't look at it that way because, you know, it's the urban life. Well, your teacher tell you. And you just see something on YouTube that said something different. Well, the point is that Reich did use his accumulators for all sorts of, quote, healing without much success. He claimed the fact that he had success. I don't believe it. He claimed that tumors were reduced, so many other things. But, you know, the operation was a success, and the patient died. And, of course, that's what it really gets down to. So I don't want to care. I don't want to rate the fact that it helped. It didn't help. That energy doesn't help you. Now, the fact that he could tap into this energy, which does apparently seem to be potent from the atmosphere, you know, the penis energy. So the whole idea is that is quite fascinating and really where his work should be highlighted and looked at in the bigger picture. And that is his cloud-busting machine, which is moronically simple. I mean, nothing that he ever made was based on any kind of electronics, any kind of energies, using electronic boosting, helping, etc. These are about, you know, kindergarten level devices and a bunch of pipes sticking up in the sky, which are connected to a hose, a conducting type hose, a metal hose, that is then stuck in some sort of water to give you a simple explanation. And of course, the materials and everything else you use are under great controversy here because many are listed. But a very simple, or if you want to make an accumulator, you use basically wool and steel wool is what the main researcher is, but that's not what he used. Basically, people were using steel and plastic. I mean, it goes on and on of what actually accumulated these energies, because apparently these accumulators really didn't do much of anything but pull in the toxicity. And anybody who knows anything about orgone accumulation understands that you're pulling in all the toxins from the atmosphere. It's virtually useless. But it was never really pushed by him that he was doing anything to heal anybody, even though he would give you two sides of that. Oh, I got all these great results, but the patient died. So he really was doing treatments on and trying to cure people of cancer, not in a deceptive way and not taking money, but he was doing research in those areas and failed horribly. This just gave the FDA a great opening to go after this sexual pervert as they thought he was. But the bottom line is he has lots of research books, which I was unaware of until recently, that have stated all these kind of. Now, the most of the research I did was on, and some of it, I haven't read really much of his books, but his theories on the psychological and the armoring and everything else. I've read some of those books. They're dry, difficult books to read. All of his stuff is difficult. They're just boring, and he has his own theories and apparently was able to make money at it and do quite well, having a fairly decent estate. But, you know, you're talking about at a time when sexuality wasn't talked about, when you had even worse government than we have today, and which is hard to believe. But the bottom line is that this was a time that if you were labeled that and somebody in authority could come after you, they would. Very typical of the oppressed. As I said, this person was probably highly religious that want to hang you because they don't like this and they think sex is bad and everything else. Well, this all just goes with all the other problems we have, and of course that's why nothing really ever gets done. So as I stated, they just saw him as a pervert. They went after him and harassed him. We also have to understand there's a lot of talk. Now, they arrested him, and of course, someone in his organization, and of course, he had very poor, apparently, representation as two attorneys turned state's evidence against him. One researcher states, well, this is appalling. He went into court trying to prove his theories. How stupid can you get? That was not the issue here. The issue was he was told not to sell his devices across state lines, making it a federal issue, and the feds are going to go after you. This is something that is done even to these days. But while he was gone, apparently, probably a bought-off, controlled person within his organization decided to sell this. He didn't get you couldn't sell it out. I mean, that's so ridiculous. So this person in his organization, whomever that was, made sure they got him in trouble where he got. So I'm sure that the FDA, not sure, I guesstimate, I think maybe that, of course, the FDA sent people in there, threatened this employee or whatever, bought him off, etc. It happens every day of the week, and people are murdered by doctors every day of the week in hospitals because they're told to and they're paid off. And nothing ever happens to him. That's another issue which I'll talk about in the future. But the bottom line, he went in there, he had terrible attorneys, and he had further problems thinking that he was going to prove his theories talking to a judge when that wasn't the issue. But, Reich wasn't all that bright and wasn't all that smart himself. He came up with some interesting theories, some mumble-jumble, some mental masturbation, and it's amazing that people are still following him, and he has numerous scholars who are writing books on him. I think there's a fascination for the fact that particularly people who are introverted, non-sexual people that think they can have sex in a kind of a backwards way by talking about or reading books on orgasms. Oh, what a turn on. So the whole idea is that this is a really kind of. So the fact that there has been scholars and many, many books on him adding to his own. Remember, you can get all his books for free on archive.org. Link down below. Now, we do have to keep all of this in mind. His work, of course, on this natural energy, his cloud-busting technology is fascinating. It appears that there is huge amounts of proof that his cloud-busting techniques worked. Not only was he able to generate huge amounts of rain, particularly in Arizona, apparently, but James DeMeo, or however you pronounce his name, was able to repeat this himself. And of course, he has to keep it secret because the people that hired him don't want to know. The Israelis and, of course, the Germans are buried in there. But, and of course, he was unable to do much to get the information out to the masses who need it so much and figure out any ways to do it. Reich would have been proud of his incompetency to really get anything done and get his message across. And by the way, of course, Mayo died of cancer, apparently, in the last couple of years, and he has another bumpkin taking over for him who's going to continue the tradition of failure. But this certainly is something to look into. This energy that is so simple to condense, to accumulate. They're orgone accumulators. They are not generators or anything else. So you accumulate it or condense it from the atmosphere, which is full of radiation and toxins and everything else, is certainly fascinating. And of course, we live in a world that we really need to have it rain in certain areas. This is causing great problems. And of course, per Reich, of course, the lack of moisture in the air and everything else reduces the lack of this energy, causing people to act goofy and kill each other, and they don't want to hump. So the whole idea is that these are the kind of things that go on. But it is good to clarify this, that while people say that he wasn't doing any of this, he was. He was doing all sorts of research in this area. But apparently, it really never treated or got any results of any value out of the use of any of these things. DeMeo at his little training institute up there had an entire little building that was a giant orgone accumulator. And people were supposed to go in there and get X amounts of effects from it. The bottom line is that we don't know what happened there either, but there was a whole room that is still there. And if you want to buy his property now that he's deaded, it's for sale. So the whole idea is that this would be fascinating to test yet again. But these kind of things are so simplistic and so easy to put together yourself, but there are major dangers here. While this energy may be good to somehow filter through, causing it to rain, or could be used in some research area, what is put together today as orgone is not, and it's dangerous. It's filth. It's been toxified by evil Satanist criminals, and the fact is that really there's never been any research done to it. People like Don Croft, of course, another guy who was so messed up from using orgone, killed himself in an accident apparently because he couldn't figure what up was. So these people perpetrate this kind of stuff, and they make the same silly claims. Of course, Don Croft made claims of actually healing people, as his wife is doing today. And if it was up to her, she'd say that this all cured cancer and everything else, these goofball little toxic pieces of resin garbage that they push on the public. So the whole idea is that this is all nonsense. It doesn't work. And of course, the reason why DeMeo himself, who got cancer, didn't use any of these treatments is because, as far as he was concerned, it didn't work. And of course, Reich himself showed it didn't work on cancer particularly. Yet there's also a lot of information saying that, well, it did kind of help, but just didn't cure, and it helps so many other things. Well, this is disinformation and urban legend again, because none of it's ever worked. There's no data proving it. Certainly DeMeo did nothing. DeMeo did claim, and there seems to be evidence of proof that cloud busting does work. But everything else is in great question and basically doesn't work. His theories of sexuality and everything else are just that, coming from a very dysfunctional person who came from a very dysfunctional background and a very dysfunctional country. So we have to understand that anybody who would get sexual advice from anybody from those areas, and this is the problem we have. Not only is this where all these very perverted therapists and psychology comes from, or psychoanalyzing, but this is also where all of our stuck in a hole, down a dead alley, physics and research come from. We're still getting a major influence from these minds, which have never done anything and are now stuck. When the emphasis was more done with the people who are Caucasians, the Greeks, the Italians, the Egyptians, and of course the people that had major influences as well, the Chinese, these are the people that make all the breakthroughs. Absolutely nothing has come from these other people who set up their little factories of incompetency and their very dogmatic belief systems that they've pretty much pushed down everybody's throat to make you into a thinking foie gras. So the whole idea is that we have to understand the reality of all that and strive to get past it. Hopefully this has clarified a bunch. Until next time.